Hello again, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show. Real talk about fake sports. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. Week 10 is in the books, and I am back from vacation to tell you all about it. Again, this is our pro sim over at simfba.com. Come check us out on the website and on Discord. We would love to have you. So as usual, we're going to go over the stats and summaries for all of the Week 10 action. I've moved things around a little bit this time, so I have individual cards for about half of the games, and then the rest are on a summary slide. This is just because it takes a long time to make all those slides, and hopefully this way I can dive a little bit more into the close games and spend a little bit less time on the blowouts, and also have more time for special segments as well. But we are still going to go over all the Week 10 games and do the usual players of the week as well. We'll go over the current standings, and then my special segment tonight, we're going to talk about extensions. We're going to look at some of the big names in the AFC who are playing in contract years right now and could be in line for really, really big money extensions, as that feature should open up soon in the Pro Sim. And then next week in the show, we'll do the NFC as well. So that's coming up, and then of course we will preview the upcoming games. So the first big game to cover is an NFC South matchup between the Falcons and the Panthers. Jose Padilla again bowling out for his new team with 485 yards and 3 touchdowns in the victory. He led the Falcons to an early 10-0 lead, but Link came back with a 53-yard completion that led to a touchdown a couple plays later and kept the game close. It was tied until late in the fourth when trying to make something happen, tied at 17, Dakota Link threw a crucial interception, and then Padilla went 4 for 4 on that final drive, scoring a touchdown right as time expired to give the Falcons the victory in that one. Rafael Rosario and Russell Barnes both showed up big time for their quarterbacks, 199 and 117 yards respectively. And then Gordon Polak with a couple of turnovers as well for the Panthers. But it was the Falcons who came out ahead in this one, bringing them to within a game of the Panthers in the South, as we will see later. Another very tight game was a defensive matchup between the Colts and the Ravens. Ravens, hopefully now after this loss, are through all of their scheme change madness. Had another tough game here. David Chop was sacked 7 times. And this is not only the 4th straight loss for the Ravens, the 4th straight shutout. They have not scored in over 16 quarters. They've lost by a combined score of 117-0. They did manage 3 takeaways against the Colts to keep it close, but were not able to get any points on the board as the Colts take the victory in this one. But again, Ravens are through their scheme change madness and hopefully can start coming back from that. It was a wild and surprising finish in the Battle of Ohio as the Browns and Bengals battled to a 21-21 tie. Browns certainly brought the pressure, as they did in their first matchup, sacking Jeremiah West 6 times. Bengals had the lead for most of this. In fact, it was 21-6 in the third quarter before the Browns scored twice, including a 2-point conversion to tie it up to 21. Late in the fourth quarter, Cincinnati actually had a 3rd and goal from the 7-yard line, but West got sacked for a huge loss, and then Lopez missed the field goal. So with under 2 minutes to go, the Bengals had a chance to go ahead, but could not take advantage. Browns did nothing, punted, and Bengals had one play. They completed a 60-yarder to Barry Madruga, but that was still short of the end zone, and so we went to overtime. In overtime, the Bengals completed another 60-yard pass to Barry Madruga, which got them close to Cleveland territory. But the drive stalled at the Cleveland 32-yard line, and instead of a long field goal, Bengals elected to punt. Browns did nothing, punted it away. Cincinnati got another 60-yard completion to Barry Madruga. But unfortunately, some Sid madness took over. They were at the 14-yard line, but they ran a play, a 10-yard gain, and then ran out of time. So it should have been a Bengals victory, but due to some Sid madness, it ended up in a tie. Madruga had catches of 55, 60, 60, and 60 yards in this game for the Bengals. Meanwhile, Juan Mora continuing to be the workhorse for the Browns with 134 yards and a receiving touchdown. But this Battle of Ohio ends in a stalemate as the teams walk off with a draw, with a tie in this one. Always a wild game when the Rams offense is on the field, as well as the Rams defense. Philip Avila, 662 yards and 5 touchdowns, including 338 yards to Scott Baldwin to lead the Rams to a wild victory in this one. Chicago actually led this one at the half, 24-20, until the Rams got 3 unanswered touchdowns in the third quarter, and not even from any takeaways. The Bears did a great job holding onto the ball this game, but they weren't able to generate any offense, and the Rams scored right out of the half to retake the lead. Bears went 3 and out. Rams drove down and scored again. Bears got a single first down, but then had to punt, and the Rams drove down again. And so, just like that, in 9 minutes, they had taken a big lead, and they coasted from there. Gerald Lewis certainly did everything he could for the Bears with 386 yards through the air and 4 touchdowns, another rushing touchdown as well. And then Cesar Whitehead with an interception and a forced fumble and a recovery. So 2 standout players there, but the Rams just unable to be stopped, breaking 50 again and getting another big conference win. Meanwhile, a shocking result in the AFC, as it was the Jets who got past Las Vegas by a score of 24-9. Jets again led by their rushing attack. They had 209 rushing yards as a team, and they had 3 different players score rushing touchdowns, including quarterback Myron Everett and James Carter, who finished with 117 yards. Defense also showed up big, sacking James Hickson, 10 times. In fact, every member of the Jets' front 7 had at least half a sack in this game, and then 10 altogether as a team. So even though Hickson put up some yards, especially to James Blank, the Jets were able to keep them out of the end zone for the most part, control the ball, and come away with a big victory in this one. Steelers and Dolphins are no strangers to wild and exciting games, so it makes sense that when they played each other, that would be the outcome. Another crazy statistical game. This one had 14 sacks in it, 7 from each team. Miami dominated early. They had 3 scoring drives, but all ended in field goals. So even though they had a huge edge early in yards gained, the lead was only 9-0. And then in the second half, Pittsburgh scored 2 quick touchdowns to take the lead. Miami answered with a drive of their own, missing a 2-point conversion to make it a 1-point game. They were up 15-14. Then Pittsburgh went on a 15-play drive, chewing up clock, going 74 yards with a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. That made it 22-15. Hammonds answered back, 5 for 5 for 75 yards on the next drive to tie it at 22. Things quieted down a bit, and the teams traded punts. But then about halfway through the fourth quarter, with the game still tied, Hammonds threw his critical interception. The Steelers were able to capitalize with a field goal. But on the ensuing drive, Hammonds led them down the field, got 2 really, really big completions. And then Sellers ran for a 29-yard touchdown run to take the lead with about 2.5 minutes to go. Pittsburgh drove down to the 24-yard line of the Dolphins, trying to retake the lead for the final time. But with just seconds to go, they were stopped on a 4th and 14, and so were unable to get that last conversion, and the Dolphins escaped with the victory. Robert Morris was fantastic, 247 yards through the air, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Meanwhile, Dean Hammonds over 500 passing yards, 200 to Kenny White. Beckman and Bookheit added a bunch of sacks as well. As I said, 14 total sacks between both teams. So a wild game with turnovers and sacks and lots of scoring and lots of yards. And ultimately, the Dolphins come away with the big win. Another great matchup in the NFC East between the Cowboys and the Eagles. This one was much closer than the final score might suggest. Philly was down 21-10 in the second half, but they came back to tie it at 21. And it wasn't until the fourth quarter that Dallas retook the lead. With 11 minutes to go, they had a field goal to make it 24-21. It looked like it would be another tight game, but the Eagles failed on 2 drives, and the Cowboys turned their next 2 drives into long touchdowns to suddenly bring it from a 1-score game to a 3-score game. And then Poole trying to bring them back, trying to get anything going through a pick 6 to Amaro Rodriguez for the final score. So in the last 11 minutes, the Cowboys scored 21 points to turn it from a close game into a rout. Jesse Knoll, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. Bruno Hansen adding over 200 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And the Poole party is still in full swing. 288 yards through the air for Aaron Poole, 26 yards and a pair of touchdowns on the ground. But ultimately, it was the Cowboys' quick score offense that pushed them across the finish line in the fourth quarter with 3 big touchdowns in the final period. So here is the rest of our Week 10 scoreboard. Seattle had no problem with San Francisco. John Woodard rushed for 2 touchdowns to lead the team there. Similarly, the Giants used their rushing attack with John Knighton scoring 3 rushing touchdowns to get past Tampa Bay, 26-8. Washington completely dominated the Saints, 71-0. Ben Rivera was sacked 14 times by that Commanders defense. And Denver crushing Buffalo as well, 56-3 was the final there. Buffalo Bills ran the ball 20 times for a total of negative 33 yards. So dominating performance there from the Broncos. Randall Hansen had 5 passing touchdowns to lead Detroit to a 50-7 win over the Cardinals. Miguel Aguilera had a great game in leading the Chargers to victory over Minnesota, 27-16. Aguilera was 27 of 32, with only 5 incompletions on the game. And the Chargers defense sacked Christian Shinnok 9 times to clinch that one. And then finally, New England with a great defensive performance, beating on Kansas City 24-3. Rashawn Lyons had 3 passing touchdowns, and the defense picked off Theo Scribner 3 times. So that is it for our Week 10 scoreboard. Our players of the week, Randall Hansen getting a shout out, as I mentioned, for his 5 touchdowns. Bruno Hansen, no relation, with his 3 touchdowns and 200 combined yards. Scott Baldwin and Kenny White each had 14 catches and hundreds of yards between them. On the defensive side, Robert Jackson, Cesar Whitehead, both with a couple of turnovers, and then Andrew Kangas with 3 interceptions, all 3 of those off of Jesse Knoll for the Eagles. And then Narinder Beckman of Pittsburgh doing absolutely everything. 2.5 sacks, forced a fumble, and recovered 1 for Pittsburgh in that close game with the Dolphins. So congratulations to all of our Week 10 players of the week. So with those results, here are our current standings. In the AFC, there's now only a half game between the Bengals and the Broncos at the top of that conference. The Bengals losing to the Rams and then tying with the Browns. Have allowed the Denver to get a little closer. Miami and Tennessee still leading their respective divisions, currently in the 3 and 4 seeds. Cleveland is now at the top of the wild cards at 6-3-1, a full game ahead of the Jets, who leapfrog the Raiders thanks to that head-to-head victory. Vegas now down to the 7th seed, just half a game ahead of the Steelers and the Chargers, both of whom have 5 losses, and so now would be on the outside looking in. There's still a lot of football left to be played. In the NFC, it remains the story of the Commanders and the Rams, undefeated at 9-0 each. Green Bay still showing up big, 7-2 to lead the North. And Carolina is now at 5-5 after that game against the Falcons. So Atlanta getting on the leaderboard for the first time. More about their relation in the South. They're only a game behind Carolina. I still don't like their odds in the wild card. But with that head-to-head victory, that's a big step in trying to catch the Panthers in the South. Meanwhile, in the wildcard race, you've got Dallas, Chicago, and Philadelphia, three very strong teams that are ensconced in those wildcard positions, with Detroit still hanging on at 5-4 on the outside looking in, but keeping pace with the Eagles, and they are just a game back there. So, as I mentioned, it's going to be time soon to look at extensions and for players to start getting offers. So I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds on that, but I do want to take a look at some big names that are in contract years right now, and so are primed to get possibly big extensions from their teams. Due to the list of names, we're going to do the AFC this week and NFC next week, as I said. Now remember, all of these players are have high enough overalls that they would definitely be worth a high compensatory pick, third or fourth round probably, if they were to leave their teams. But that wouldn't take place until next year's draft, until the year after this next one, I should say. So 2 drafts from now. And those picks could get canceled out by, depending on how many free agents that team adds. So more than likely, I think most of these stars will re-sign, or at least be offered extensions, given what they offer for their teams. Big name, of course, right at the top is Dean Hammonds and David Chop. I think Hammonds is set to reset the market as the best pocket quarterback in the league. He's only 29 currently, and so I think he has several great years left in him. And if not by dollars, then certainly just by value, I think is set to set a new high water mark for players across the league. Although David Chop is only a year older and represents a huge investment for that Falcons team. So expecting to see big numbers for him as well. Michael Carter is the highest ranked in terms of overall player on this list, a fullback who has been helping to carry the Broncos with that great defense and rushing attack to the top of the AFC West. And then a trio of receivers, Garul, Ellswick, and Davis. I think Ellswick is the big name to look at here just because he's so young. He's 27. Now, that might mean that Indianapolis can get away with a lower dollar contract if they make more of it guaranteed. But still going to be a super, super high value for a player of his caliber. And he's not even done developing yet. He's in his 5th year now, so he could be, an 88 or an 89 after the next progressions run. So I think Ellswick could be in like Matthew Madden territory as far as how much he could get paid. And then Carmine Rhodes, the other big name in terms of offensive skill players, the tight end for Denver. On the offensive line, you have a lot of big names, including a trio of guards, McNeil, Diaz, Penn. Diaz is the biggest one there. Again, with him being in his 5th year, he could be above 90. He could be our highest rated player in the entire sim after progressions run at the end of this year. I don't know that he'll reset the guard market just because Paul Caruso did that. The Carolina Panthers gave him an outrageous salary, something like $80 million for a 5-year contract. So I don't know if Diaz will hit those numbers, but certainly I think in line for a big, big payday for the Chargers to keep him around. Roosevelt Penn of the Patriots is another name, again, just because of his youth, that I think could be getting a big offer from them as they have worked their way out of cap hell in this last offseason. And then Nelson Garcia and James Knoll as tackles as well. Both set to get, I think, big numbers for those teams to keep them from hitting free agency. On the defensive side of things, we've got Philip Nagel and Richard Crawford for the Broncos and the Browns, respectively. Big bodies, big shoes to fill, and big coffers to fill as well to keep them around. And then a handful of linebackers, high-level linebackers, really hard to come by. So Wiseman, Ridley, and Craw, I think, all worth substantial investments. Again, most of these players are... A player 8 year means they're 30 right now. So maybe there's a concern, given their potential, about a fall-off in like a 3rd or 4th year. but I think there's still plenty of time to build in a big deal and a big extension for a lot of these players. George Kent and Robert Davis, both 84 overalls. I believe Davis is the highest rated safety in the league, or tied for it. So he could set a new market for safeties with whatever the Browns offer him. And then Alvin Anan is another name to watch. Again, only in his fourth year. So this is not a situation we would expect to see going forward, because fourth-year players would probably just be finishing up their rookie deal. But in this case, with the generated contracts, Anan, going into his fifth year, still eligible for an extension. And again, he could be 80 plus and then could be on to another big gain. He has 2 more prime years of development. So it could easily be mid-80s or high 80s, given his snap level. So definitely worth an investment to stay up in Buffalo. So yeah, big names, big numbers. These are just a few of the ones that I expect to see will be driving the market for their respective positions when extensions reopen. And we'll keep you abreast of all that information as we hear more. So, for next week, we are going to kick things off with an AFC South matchup, with Houston going to Jacksonville. In the early slot on Sunday, we have Carolina going to Philadelphia, so 2 playoff hopefuls going to duke it out there. And then 2 division leaders in the AFC when Tennessee goes to Miami to face the Dolphins. And then one more game of note, Dallas will be going to Atlanta to play the Falcons. Again, the Falcons only a game back. So with Carolina being at Philadelphia, if the Falcons could somehow pull an upset, they could pull even with the Panthers, though that is going to be hard to do when the Cowboys come visiting. In the afternoon spot, we have Las Vegas going to Chicago. So another tall order for the Raiders, who are losing ground in that playoff race to now have to go and play the Bears on the road. Tall order for them. We'll see what James Hickson can dial up for them. On Sunday night, we have Buffalo and New England, another divisional AFC matchup. And then finally, on Monday night, we're going to see 7-2 Green Bay go to Mile High, go to Denver to face the 8-2 Broncos. I'm very excited for that cross-conference matchup, and we'll see how these 2 field generals in Garibay and London face off against each other. So it should be a great game. That is everything I have for this edition of the SimNFL show. Thank you everyone for watching. Good luck and have fun.